Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? Well, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Mike Wollard. I am going to do my best to make this one short and sweet. John's meeting me at the gym. It's 9:06, and we're meeting at 10 a.m. This morning to get a lift in, and so we'll make this nice, short, and sweet. Plus, I think all of you, judging by how long people watch or listen to the podcast, the shorter the better, and it's easier to consume. And honestly, it gives me more material to kind of stretch it out over a period of time. So, last week was awesome. Super busy, just signing clients, and I think Angela had something like 55 sales calls booked. I might have talked about it in the last one, but it's just exciting to see the business grow and just the support, whether it's on the podcast, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's just clients being super thankful and grateful. It's all been awesome. So thank you to whoever's listening and watching even right now. It's just kind of been a dream come true these past couple months and watching God do what he does best. And so, yeah, it's been super cool. We're just going to dive right in today. Got a few different questions here that I'm just going to kind of spitball and try to answer fairly quickly, and then there can always be follow-up if I left anything off the list type thing. But one question I get a lot is just about reverse dieting and kind of what that is and what that needs to look like. And so basically reverse dieting usually comes when there's been such, whether damage to your metabolic damage that has occurred, whether that's through yo-yo dieting, bad eating habits, your metabolism is just really slow from lack of muscle, or after just a really long dieting period. We're not meant to be lean in the first place. We're built for survival. We're built for lasting a long time and surviving, not necessarily being lean and stepping on a competition stage. And so our body adapts throughout that process. What at one point works as putting you in a deficit eventually won't, and that's why having such a drastic drops in your calorie intake, these crash diets and things like that's why they don't work, as your metabolism adapts that much more quickly. And so then it thinks we're starving, and it goes into a whole ordeal that I'm actually going to talk about in the Let's Clarify series this week, just about how your body reacts to those sorts of situations, how it develops new fat cells, how we don't ever get rid of fat cells, they only shrink. And so we'll dive into that in the next one. But whenever you have such a drastic change, you adapt quicker, everything slows down, and a lot of your metabolism is, yes, based on like your lean body mass and how much muscle you have. That dictates your resting metabolic rate as well, but so does just your body weight in general. Somebody who's 400 pounds and unhealthy is going to have a higher metabolism than somebody who's 150 pounds and shredded, but it's just because that person, that body weight, the size of the organs, just for everything to function properly, that person's going to need a lot more calories than a person who's 150 pounds. And so reverse dieting comes when your calories are just so low. Actually, there's a few factors that kind of come into play that make me think a person would needs to implement a reverse diet. You've got people that have dieted for 2 or 3 years without any sort of maintenance phase, without any sort of bulk or surplus or anything calorie wise. And so, they're hanging on by a thread. Their recovery's terrible. They're sleeping terrible. Their mood is terrible. They're not getting good results anymore. Everything's just kind of really bad. That's usually when I take that's the first thought of like, hey, maybe reverse dieting might be it. And that's why it's such a dangerous game with clients to sign up who've been eating or dieting or trying to do whatever on their own for so long. And they don't want, they're used to eating 1,500 calories. Well, if we're on 1,500 calories and you're not losing weight, I can't really drop you that much lower. And so now you have a client who just signed up, who's trying to lose 30 pounds, and we're potentially going to have to reverse diet before we can even diet the normal way, just to get their metabolism running properly and efficiently. And we want it to run inefficiently. When we're trying to lose weight, we want our body to burn through those calories pretty quick. But often our bodies are in this survival mode, and that gets a bad rap from a camp over here, thinking that our bodies don't really enter that, but it's just a good term. Just our bodies are trying to figure out when we're going to eat next, and so it's just storing fat as quickly as it can and trying to prepare for the next time we're going to be able to eat. Our body is, from the beginning of time, has been built for survival, not necessarily to get lean. And so it doesn't know any better between, when you're doing these fasting things, or, you're every other day fasting, or eating a whole lot one day and then a whole lot little the next day, or weekly, however you're, kind of bouncing around. Our bodies can't kind of figure out what's going on. And so it's just, all right, I know that we starve every once in a while. So when we do eat, let's just store it all. And it becomes a really big mess. And so reverse dieting, basically what it is it just slowly increases your caloric intake over a period of time, just to give your refresh everything, kind of hit a reset. And so usually clients that I have that have made an insane amount of progress, that have kind of been on it for a while, 9 months to a year, of pretty much constant dieting. If I don't throw diet breaks in there, a lot of clients I will, whether it's a week or two off, whether that's in those weeks off, really it's just I bring them back up to maintenance for a little bit, just kind of let their body recover, and then we go back into whatever that next phase looks like. Everybody's kind of different, and so I just really pay attention to all the red flags, yellow flags that kind of pop up, just saying, hey, something's off. Let's kind of like assess that and fix that. And I enjoy that part of it. It's really easy to set somebody on some macros in a workout program and let them hit the road. But it's, 6 months in when they start having issues that pop up and start hitting plateaus, and things aren't as easy anymore. And that's when having a coach, really comes into play, being able to make those minor adjustments and kind of troubleshoot for you, instead of having to Google, and then Google tells you that you're dying, instead of the fact that it's like, no, you just need a little bit more sleep and a little bit more food and you're good. And so anyway, so that's pretty much what reverse dieting is. It's kind of working your way back up in calories, just to kind of boost your resting metabolic rate and just kind of have your body burning through those calories more quickly and recovering better, and just everything kind of functioning better. So another question I had is just when to go to maintenance calories, how to calculate your maintenance calories, what affects your maintenance calories, things like that. I touched on the maintenance calories a little bit as far as what affects it. So the amount of muscle that you have affects your metabolic rate. How much you weigh affects your metabolic rate. And so that's going to affect kind of where your maintenance calories are at. The longer you're in a deficit and you hit plateaus and your metabolism adapts, the lower your metabolism, the lower the calories you burn in a day, all that kind of starts to drop. And so the further you are into any sort of a diet or a cut or, contest prep, whatever it is, your metabolism is slowing down because you're losing weight. And eventually you get to a point where your body fat's so low that you're losing muscle too. And so you get to this low point, and so it actually really slows your metabolism down, which is why you have to keep taking food away. And so eventually you hit that point where you can't really healthily go any lower, mentally, physically, you just can't go any lower. And so you have to turn around and head the other direction. And that's where the reverse dieting kind of comes in. When to go to maintenance, it's kind of a personal preference thing. There's a lot more research coming out now that your typical, dirty bulks and super drastic cuts aren't as necessary anymore. There's a lot of research coming out that you can build muscle and get strong on just your maintenance calories, which I firmly believe that you can get strong on your maintenance calories. There's such a neurological component that, building muscle needs those excess calories and needs to recover. But as far as like the strength side of things, you don't have to be super jacked to be strong. There's plenty of people, you'll see a 150-pound kid that can deadlift 600 pounds, but then a 400-pound guy, 300-pound guy who can't, deadlift 225. And so you see all the time, you see just the being efficient in your movement and getting those muscle fibers in your body used to these sorts of movements. It's a whole lot of repetition, and it's a whole lot of mental getting everything to work how it's supposed to, that doesn't always translate to having more muscle. So little side note, I'm trying not to ramble and it's super hard, but there's your side note. You can get strong without necessarily building more muscle to do it, and so you can get stronger on your maintenance calories. There's a lot of people that and more research coming out that staying on your maintenance calories nearly year round, 40 42 weeks, whatever, out of the year, and just after every 12 weeks, maybe you do a little mini cut, or maybe in 8-week cycles of you being at maintenance, you kind of wait, and then do like a mini cut just to kind of get the body fat down a little bit. That lasts 2 to 3 weeks, and then you go right back to maintenance. And you pretty much just do this all the time. That way you're always sitting in maintenance. You're never really get those negative effects of being in a deficit for a really long time. And you just throw in these mini cuts, and these mini cuts are a little bit more drastic, but they're over a shorter period of time. And so you hop right back into maintenance after that. it's not really my preference. I like the cut, maintenance, bulk. I like having those all separated. I think the years of the dirty bulk are slowly getting behind us. I think enough research has come out to say that you don't have to be in a 1,500 calorie deficit and get super fat just to build muscle and get strong. I think everybody's probably always known that, but it just sounds cooler and looks cooler for a guy to just eat whatever the heck he wants and just get really big and strong. And it's always during the winter, so you're just wearing hoodies and growing a big beard, and you just become this big grizzly bear, just to add 50 pounds to a movement, if that. And so I'm on the other side of the camp where it's you have a significant surplus. Anything where it's just right on the other side of maintenance calories. If you're doing just a very slight surplus or barely even of a deficit, the results are going to kind of be in that same ballpark. They're going to be just as small. Yeah, you can play it safe, but it's going to take a lot longer to get those results. And there's obviously the further extreme as well. Too big of a surplus and your body fat goes too high, and too low of a cut, too extreme of a cut, and everything starts to slow down and you don't get good results that way either. So it's finding that happy medium of 400, 500 calorie surplus, that's a super slow and steady one that gives you the extra food that you need to recover well and to support the heavy weight that you're lifting. Make sure you're recovering, make sure you're building muscle. And then same thing with the diet, a 500, 750 calorie deficit that's nothing extreme. You're shooting for guys a max of about a 1% body weight loss per week, and females anywhere from 0.25 to 0.75. I think kind of what the research says. Guys are 0.5 to 1.0. So somewhere in that ballpark of like weight loss per week is a pretty good healthy range without everything kind of starting to slow down or freak out and it kind of seep into other areas of life. But that's kind of where I land as far as bulks and cuts are just a good chunk on either side, but without going too extreme one direction or the other, and without staying too close to maintenance. But that being said, when would you want to go to maintenance? For a lot of people, that's just whenever their diet phase is over. They're not necessarily trying to get bigger or like put on more muscle necessarily, but they're not trying to cut either. So that maintenance phase really is a good place to just get stronger at. In my opinion, maybe a 200 calorie surplus just to have a little bit of extra. But for the most part, I think that maintenance phase is, it puts you right there in the middle, especially if you're competing and you have to be in a certain weight class. You don't have to cut or bulk down to it, bulk up to it or cut down to it. I think being at that maintenance phase and just getting as strong as you can there, that's really essentially my goal, getting down to 215, 220, if not a little bit lower, just kind of depending on where I feel like I want to stay strong no matter where I'm at. And so where my weight ends up, I'm not totally sure yet. It's where I can be healthy and look comfortable and all my blood markers are good and my blood pressure's good. That's really what I care about more than anything. And then once I find where that weight is and where I'm healthiest and strongest and fastest and etc., that's kind of where, okay, this is maintenance calories for me. This is kind of where I want to live for 9 months out of the year. Maybe a little bit of a mini cut before summer and then maybe a month bulk or something in the winter. But for the most part, I want to find out wherever that maintenance calories is and then just get as strong as I can there. I think that typically works really well for a lot of people, and I've gotten close a few times to kind of getting that dialed in, and it's always felt really good for me. It's just a consistency thing more than anything else, and so that's on me. But yeah, so maintenance calories, super useful for coming out of diets and just being a good place just to kind of chill for a bit, get routines down and get strong and not to worry about dieting. And especially if you're coming out of a diet break, you don't necessarily have to go into a surplus where you're going to get super bloated and put on a ton of weight quick. So just working your way back to maintenance and then just kind of chilling for a while is always a great strategy. Talked about when it changed. So a lot of people ask, like, do carbs or fats matter? I've covered it quite a bit, but I figured I'd just very quickly kind of breeze over it. No, not really. Fats have a lower threshold. So like a bare minimum, you want to have, 20 to 25% of fats, like minimum type thing. That's kind of where I prefer carbs. I lift and I'm usually decently active. And so my fats tend to stay a little bit lower in my macro distribution. And then carbs, I tend to have a little bit higher. And then my protein pretty much stays the same all the time. And so it's really a personal preference thing once you get the fat distribution set where you want it. After that, it's really personal preference. And there's always going to be, like diabetics. There's always going to be people who can't have high fats because of, their risk for like heart disease, things like that. So there's always going to be extremes to both situations, which is why I say personal preference. If it also is your diet and your lifestyle and, rules that you have to, then yes, do that. Don't come attack me for saying that it's a personal preference if that doesn't necessarily apply to you. People are really kind of savage in that way. If you make one statement, they just assume that it applies to them, and then they kind of go crazy and attack you because they have some weird caveat to the rule type of thing. But anyways, I won't dive into that. It really is a personal preference and kind of whatever fits your lifestyle. If you're more intense and you work out pretty hard and do cardio and things like that, then those carbs are really going to be your friend because they're going to be a way quicker energy source than the fats are. But if that all happens, in a 2-hour period, get your carbs in on the front and back end of whatever that physical activity is. Then throughout the rest of the day, lots of protein, veggies, fats that are a little more sustaining, a little more filling throughout the rest of the day when you don't need that quick energy. And that's really kind of how I balance out my days. Usually all my physical activity happens more in the morning and afternoons. And so then dinner throughout the rest of the night, I'm eating, high protein meals, veggies. I try not to have as much carbs just because they make me hungrier. And so that's, a Power Crunch bar is protein and fats, very little carbs. So I'll have one of those before bed, if not a protein shake. And so it's all kind of setting up your strategy throughout the day. And so I have both. I have all three. I think they're all three important. But as far as how you distribute them, protein aside, but carbs and fat wise, it's really just kind of personal preference to whatever fits your lifestyle. And then lastly, we just had just some generic like strategies for weight loss. I've probably covered some of these before. One is just consistency. And so kind of how I talked about earlier with the yo-yo dieting and things like that, having a week where you're eating 1,500 calories and then for 5 days, and then the weekend you're having 4,000. That's never going to kind of go well. Your blood sugar is going to be all over the place, insulin spiking like crazy. Your hunger level is going to be all over the place. Ghrelin, that your hunger hormone is going to be super, super active just because there's no stability through that. And so making sure you have some consistencies, not necessarily like down to the macro, to the meal time, things like that. But there is something to be said about, choosing if you're going to have, 5 meals a day or, 3 meals and a couple snacks and kind of staggering that out and having something similar. The more consistent and kind of homeostasis you can find that's going to work well for you, the better. It just keeps your body more consistent and used to kind of what's going on, as opposed to having a whole lot and a whole little and a whole lot and a whole little, or if you eat all your protein and fats early on in the day, and so then all you have are 300 grams of carbs left, and that's all you're just eating bowls of rice throughout the night. That's not necessarily optimal. Doesn't impede weight loss, not if you're in a deficit, but it's still not optimal. And I've talked about that before too. The factors that affect your weight loss. That's if you're in a deficit, then you're going to lose weight, but there are things that affect you being in a deficit. And so that consistency really helps overall schedule wise, but it also helps body wise too, just kind of lock into a rhythm that works really well. High volume, low calorie foods. So your broccolis, berries, most protein is going to be nice and filling. Things like that are going to be, you can eat a whole lot of for very little calorie expenditure. Broccoli is one of those like superfoods basically, where it's super low calorie, a lot of volume, you're getting fiber, things like that. They're going to help keep you full. Throw that on pretty much any meal, and it kind of helps it last a lot longer. So especially as you get further and further into any sort of like prep or even further into a diet, that broccoli being able to kind of help fill you up when you're down to a fourth of a cup of carbs at every meal and you're super sad and depressed, that at least helps a little bit just to kind of keep you full. Diet sodas, I'll probably get blasted in the comments, get lots of DMs, but I welcome it. Aspartame, it's not that bad. There's plenty of research to support it at this point that I don't really know why people keep kind of raving about it. The studies that they did in mice, the studies that they've done in mice and things like that are not, it translates to basically like 100 Diet Cokes for us. So we won't even, that's not even remotely close to being on my worry list. I don't drink that much. You're going to be dehydrated and affected by that side of things, about your lack of water intake before you are before you're affected by the diet soda itself or any ingredient that's in there. So it's making sure that you're prioritizing water. Obviously, that's going to help with filling you up and keeping everything running properly. But the diet soda is like, if you're craving something sweet and it's between a Hershey bar or a Diet Coke, I wouldn't drink a Diet Coke. A Diet Dr. Pepper or a Diet Mountain Dew, whatever. Some of those zeros taste great, especially compared to as close to the real thing as you're going to get. But having one of those a day or a couple a week, whatever it is not going to impede literally anything. There's actually plenty of studies that have come out that have shown that having some sort of sweet alternative actually helps you stick to your diet plan better. And again, water is always going to be number one. But if you've hit your water intake and you're good in those areas, then supplementing, a Gatorade Zero that doesn't have the calories and the sugars that a normal Gatorade does. If I'm sitting at home at 7 o'clock at night or first thing in the morning, I'm not going to drink a Gatorade where I'm getting 30, 40 grams of carbs when I'm not physically active yet. But if I've hit my water intake, all that's good, and I just want something sweet instead of eating something sweet, then implementing a diet soda or one of those Gatorade Zeros, Propels, whatever, all those are great options that are going to not, take away your calories and definitely are not going to ruin any sort of weight loss progress or be unhealthy in any way. And then I think lastly is just kind of knowing yourself. And so knowing your weaknesses, knowing your strengths, knowing, setting up kind of barriers. So if at night is when you snack and things like that, and if there are certain snacks that you just can't control yourself around, then don't buy them, or at least until you've developed a habit where you don't have to buy them. For me, Shark Tank is a huge, really any show at night, but Shark Tanks especially, when I was living by myself, there was just such a trigger that I could have just eaten a 5-course meal, dessert, busting at the seams full, and the moment I throw Shark Tank on, I'm hungry and looking for a snack. And so kind of knowing what those weaknesses and stuff are, letting your spouse and kids get involved, kind of helping them be your support system, and finding that accountability, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, somebody that can kind of go alongside with you and just help you set up those barriers and parameters, and making sure that you're making good choices throughout the day, making sure you're spreading up your protein throughout the day. But it's really just kind of doing that life audit that I've talked about before, and kind of that kitchen audit, making sure that the things that need to be there are there, making sure you have foods readily available. I'm lazy, and so if I don't meal prep and there's nothing in there, maybe I'll make a sandwich, but more often than not, I'm either grabbing fast food or I'm not eating at all. And so it's one of those, like, I've got to know myself and know that I need meal prep ready and in there. That's why I use Healthy Innovations, which is a meal prep company that my friends run in Northwest Arkansas. It's phenomenal. It's made fresh. There's a plug for them. They're really, really good. And I haven't bought them in probably 4 to 6 weeks, and it shows with how sloppy my diet's been. And even eating fast food, even getting grilled chicken somewhere, the sodium and things that are in a lot of the processed foods that we eat are not beneficial to diet plan or to keeping me full, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's setting yourself up for success. It's plotting out everything, from start to finish, kind of what your day looks like, and making sure that you've got everything in place to help you succeed, making sure that you have the right foods, you have the right schedule, you have everything prepped and ready to go. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Our schedules are filling up super fast with clients, and our rosters are almost full. And so I would ask you to DM if you have any sort of interest. We'd love to be able to help and work with you if you have any sort of questions or concerns. We'd love to help you in any sort of way if anything doesn't make sense. Yeah, it's super exciting times. And so I thank you for checking out the podcast. If you have any questions, reach out, and we'll talk to you soon.